Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hi there. Welcome back to Bite Size Balance. I have my actual BFF here today. Hi, Meg.
Hey, girl.
So you guys maybe might remember Megan. We did an episode, I think it was probably season 1, but it might have been season 2. We did an episode where Megan came on and we talked about my history of recurrent miscarriage and pregnancy loss, and Megan kind of helped me tell that story. So if you like this episode, go back and listen to that one, because that's the other conversation that I had with her here. I'd love to have her on more often, but she's busy and I don't think she loves the podcast. Do you love the podcast, Megan?
No, but I'm taking some courses, so I'm opening my mind to new opportunities and experiences. So you never know what the future will bring.
And also she can't say no to me because I'm like her oldest, dearest pal. So the reason I wanted to have you on today, Megan, is because you and I both went through the same transition this year, which is our last child, your last child, and my 2 children at the same time both left. And so we became empty nesters together, which is sort of fitting for us because we also kind of became parents together and have been through this whole thing together. So just a little history. Megan and I have known each other since we were about 18. Neither one of us can really remember how we met.
But, I know, it's so weird, but yeah, it's true.
But I think it was, at least in part, we worked together for sure. So we ended up working at the same cafe, and that's where we became pretty tight. But Megan was also hanging out at Dalhousie University a lot when I was there in my second year. And that was the same year. It must have been the same year we were working together. I don't know. Anyway, we became really close really fast. And
Wendy had me at hello, by the way, you guys.
Oh, you're so cute. I have this piece written about Megan that I'll read at some point, but I refer to her as the Thelma to my Louise, I think is how I put it. But so that's funny that you said that. Yeah, we really clicked. And I mean, it's just been, I'm so lucky to have the friendship that I have with you, Megan. I just feel so appreciative of it. But this last piece, which won't be the last piece for us, but this most recent piece in our friendship is that we've gone through this empty nesting thing together. And we've had so many conversations offline, just privately, about what we're experiencing and some of the really great things about it and some of the really tough things about it. And I thought you'd be a great person to come on and kind of talk that through with, because we've both learned some things since August when we dropped our last ones off. So we met each other when we were 18. I ended up going to law school. Megan moved out west. We were separated for a while. I actually met my husband for the first time at Megan's, what are we going to call that place? It wasn't really, I was going to say crash pad because it was kind of a dump, but her student housing, her student accommodations at University of Victoria. And that's where I met my husband for the first time, although I wasn't really love at first sight. And then I met him again. Megan ended up moving to Calgary, which is where I ended up after law school with her partner, now husband. And I started hanging out at their house. And
I think you might know this from the first podcast if you listen to it. My husband and Wendy's husband were first year res roommates together, had never met each other, became best friends.
Yeah. So I ended up meeting Rob, my husband, again at Megan's place in Calgary, probably about 4 years after I'd met him the first time. And I was dating somebody else and he was dating someone else. And so for at least a year, nothing was happening with us. But eventually he saw his opening and swooped in, and I ended up marrying him. So then Megan and I then it was like, this game is on. And Megan was married. They were married a year before us. And
it's like twins marrying twins, kind of, but not really.
Yeah, it feels a little incestuous when I think about it, but it's not. It's an awesome story. And Rob and I were in Megan's wedding party, and Megan and Jack were in our wedding, and it was kind of meant to be. And then Megan got pregnant before I did, and had her first child, who I refer to as my first child, the lovely Ella, who is now in her 4th year. Yep,
in her 5th year, really, like is finishing this year.
She's finishing this year, and then I started trying to have a child, as we talked about in that other episode, right after that, and didn't have a lot of success with that. Had a couple miscarriages, was a super tough couple of years. And then we decided to go the adoption route, and we ended up adopting my son, Duncan.
Duncan.
Megan, who Megan refers to as her son, Duncan, as well. And in the meantime, you had Eve. So you'd had your second daughter, who is now in her third year. At Western. So she's in university. And then after we adopted Duncan, of course, I was already pregnant with Georgia. Again, that crazy story is in that episode about the recurrent pregnancy loss. And I had my daughter 7 months later, and Megan got pregnant again in that time frame after Duncan, and had her third daughter, Kate.
5 months after Georgia.
5 months after Georgia. So we had 5 kids easily under 5, for sure, for a long time. And those early mothering years, we spent an awful lot of time together, because we actually lived very, very close to each other the entire time that I lived in Calgary. We started by Megan and Jack bought a house, and we moved down the block from them. And then we lived there until they moved. And then we didn't want to be there anymore, because they weren't there anymore. So we found a house that was, again, just a few houses away from them, and moved there. So we were always together. And we shared a lot of parenting together. We spent a lot of time supporting each other as moms during those really tough years when kids are really little and you're exhausted and there's not a lot of like payback. And, we were both trying to manage careers at the same time and figure out how to do all of it. And so that was, I think, a really formative time in our friendship. And then, of course, in 2008, we decided to move back to Halifax. And the most heartbreaking thing about leaving, it was 2008, I think. Yeah. The most
I was just thinking about, Ella's age. Yeah.
Yeah. The most heartbreaking thing about that was leaving you guys. So it was really, really hard. And I knew how hard it was on you, because you guys at one point were going to move, and I was devastated. Like, it was so hard for me. I mean, I wasn't saying that at the time, but I knew when I told you that we were leaving that it was going to be really hard on you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I remember buying you that necklace, remember? And it was supposed to be like us.
Yeah. Yeah. So needless to say, we have a really special friendship, and we're going to talk about our experience with the empty nesting piece. So Kate, the youngest of Megan's daughters, and Duncan,
of our brood, Kate's youngest of the crew,
collective children, and Duncan are at university together this year, which is very cool. Megan and I we were so hopeful that would end up happening, but we didn't want to meddle too much in all of it. And our dream ended up coming true, that 2 of our children ended up at the same university, and a university in my home province and Megan's home province, which meant she had a reason to visit, which is awesome. So weirdly, as we're recording this podcast, Megan, where are you?
I'm in Kate's room. Upstairs in Calgary.
And Kate is in my house.
In Georgia's room.
In my daughter's bedroom, which we call Georgia Kate's room, because my daughter's middle name is actually Kate, and Kate, Megan's daughter, stays there whenever she's in the city. So Kate is actually upstairs. So I'm actually parenting Megan's youngest this weekend. Not that she needs a lot of parenting anymore. So Kate and Duncan are at Acadia together. My daughter, Georgia, ended up going to Ottawa, which is in the middle of the country. Megan's middle daughter, Eve, is at Western, and Megan's oldest daughter is out at UBCO in Kelowna in British Columbia on the other side of the country. So our kids are all over the place. So, okay, let's get started on some of the things that we have been talking about. Here's the first thing. they're here.
Can't wait to hear what it is.
They're here all the time. Like I've talked a lot on this podcast about how much grief I went through, and you know how hard it was for me in the spring when we were selling our family home and the place where the kids grew up, and I was feeling all of this like overwhelm and sadness about the fact that they were going to leave. I was so worried about how I was going to cope with it, and there have definitely been lots of tough moments in it, but they're not what I expected. It hasn't been that grief and sadness. It's been other stuff, which we're going to talk about. But the thing that's been the most surprising to me is how, and this is not probably the case for you because of where your kids are, but there's been someone here almost every second weekend since school started. So Kate's here right now. You know, last weekend, Kate was here. Duncan was here for a night. Georgia was home the weekend before that because she's sick, which we're going to talk about. You know, we've just had like Megan came for Thanksgiving this year. And so Kate and Megan and the rest of my family and Georgia, we all had Thanksgiving together. It just feels like there have been kids here a lot, which I really love.
My experience has been quite different because Ella came home unexpectedly and Kate came home for her reading week. But aside from that, I haven't really had anyone here, except my experience is a little bit different because I have been emptying the nest and you emptied the nest. Yes. So I think how we feel about the empty space is probably a little bit different.
Yeah. You're probably more used to the quiet than I am. Yeah. For me, that's been a big,
because I went from 3 to 2 to 1 and you went from full house to nothing. Right. So
yeah. I found the quiet to be weird, but also I've kind of grown to like it. In the beginning, when they first left, I was like, I would find playlists on Apple of acoustic versions of like Taylor Swift, for example, and just listen to that because it reminded me of my kids and have it on the background because it sounded like there were people here. I struggled with that in the early weeks. But then they just keep coming back, which is very cool. And I feel so grateful that I feel grateful it's my house that they're coming back to. And I feel badly that it's not yours because it's really fun to have kids here. And I remember speaking to a mutual friend of ours' mother, and she's in the summer, and she said, yeah, you get so worked up about them leaving. You spend all this time worrying about what it's going to be like. And then they're constantly there. You realize they actually didn't leave. And of course, so many people said that to me, like, they'll be back. This isn't the end, but it feels like the end when you're going through it. So I just wanted to share.
It's like the end before you're going through it.
Yeah.
It kind of doesn't feel like the end once you're in it, which is weird.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, when I was moving my kids into university, I wonder what your experience was with this. I was just so excited for them that there wasn't any time for me to be sad. Even when I drove away from campus with you, because we dropped Duncan and Kate off together, which was really fun. Like we set up Kate's dorm room, and then Duncan's time to move in was a couple hours later. And then we got Duncan all set up. I wasn't sad when we drove away. It was like a feeling of great joy for my kids that they were going to have this opportunity and that they were where they wanted to be.
I felt very comfortable, especially with Kate, because she was the catalyst for the empty nest, knowing that she was with Duncan, knowing that you were down the road. I mean, proverbially down the road, but that was very, very comforting for me. And I it would be more difficult, I think, if you guys weren't there, but yeah, it was like right on. Those kids are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, it's weird. It is definitely, I wonder if other people have had the experience. I'd love to hear from you if you're listening and you're an empty nester, if you found the same thing with the timing, where most of the grief and the stress around becoming an empty nester, being an empty nester, actually happened before they left, because that was definitely the way it was for me. And I know for you too, we talked about how worried both of us were, about what it was going to feel like this fall.
I still have to say, I feel like an old person because my car was always full of Taylor Swift, and now I got the CBC on. So I do feel in the car, I feel particularly old. And I'm looking forward to Kate's coming home on Monday. I can't wait to get the Taylor going again.
So I drove up to the university this morning to pick Kate up because she's finished her exams, or she's doing, most of them are take home. So she's going home on Monday, but she's staying with us for the weekend. And the first thing I said to her when she got in the car is, you can plug as soon as I get out of here, Google Maps, you can plug your phone in. And we listened to Taylor and the rest of her gang all the way in, which was kind of nice. So yeah, I totally hear you on that. It was definitely a different experience with Georgia, though. I did leave Ottawa feeling very excited for her because she was exactly where she wanted to be and she was really excited, but I had nobody there. So it was
That's my experience with Eve. Even Georgia are very similar. No one in Ontario, drop them off.
Yeah.
Alone.
Yeah. And you had, I mean, Eve ended up starting university in the pandemic,
which was a nightmare.
Like the height of the pandemic, and it was awful. And she had a really, really tough time, as did all kids, I think. Isolated in residence, all classes online, no real community spaces that were available.
No one allowed in your room. Like,
yeah, that was a really weird situation. And then Georgia, different situation, but has been sick for most of the first semester and is still sick. She was sick when I left her in Ottawa with something. We didn't know what, a flu or something. It wasn't COVID, but she was sick, and maybe it was the mono. I don't know. And then by the time her first set of midterms came around, she was just so ill. And then she ended up testing positive for mono at some point. I feel like that was after Thanksgiving. She tested positive for mono, and then ended up, she came home for her reading week and it was awful. We had to hospitalize her to get her fluids and stuff. She was so sick. And then she went back to school, and I worried about her every single day after she went back, because I didn't want her back there, but she's in a really demanding program. And I felt I had to kind of weigh the pros and cons. And I felt like the stress and anxiety of not being there for her would maybe have caused her more damage than being there sick. And then I ended up having to go to Ottawa for a week, wanting to go to Ottawa, and I set up in an Airbnb, and I worked there for a week, and I had her come stay with me after her classes so that I could feed her and just get my eyeballs on her, because that to me has been the hardest piece of this. When your kids are sick and they're nowhere near you, there's nothing you can do. You can't even you can't triage them. You can't. And my kids were really independent before they left for university. They did a lot of stuff for themselves. I stopped doing a lot of things for my kids a long time ago, but the one thing I still did was take care of them when they were sick. Yeah. And so that's been really hard because, I'm on FaceTime with her trying to figure out whether her tonsils are big enough that she should be going to the hospital, and trying to assess her breathing and all of this crazy stuff. And then trying to give her advice as to what to do. And of course, the medical system is a complete shit show right now in Canada, or at least in Ottawa for sure, and definitely also here in Nova Scotia. And
Calgary's not good.
Yeah, she can't get in anywhere to see a GP. There are no walk-in clinics. I think there's one, and you have to line up 7 hours in advance. And the wait at the ER is like,
And also they're practicing being independent, right? So aside from the fact that they're actually unwell and need care, they're having to navigate that by themselves, which is totally different for us as parents and totally different for them as kids.
Yeah. And you have to kind of let them do it. Like, that was the hardest part for me, was saying, like, here's the thing. I think maybe if you went to the ER, I know you don't want to go there, and I know you don't want to wait there, but I think if you went there, you would get some treatment for this. So they would probably give you a steroid for your tonsils. Like, this is not our first rodeo with her tonsils. She's had this now for the last 18 months. And so I was kind of talking her through that, but at the end of the day, it's her decision.
Yeah.
And I actually had to say to my kid, here's what you need to be paying attention to tonight. And if these things happen, you need to call 911. And that was the scariest conversation I had with her. And that night I did not sleep.
Yeah. I have to say, thinking about it now, like the thing about kids leaving, about everything, regardless of whether or not they're sick, it's like there's an element of relief because you're not thinking about their everyday, but there's also an element of like not terror, but worry. Yeah. Because they are making their own decisions, and it gets.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's relieving, and it's scary. Like you're floating,
Yeah, like one of the things I had on my list of like best things about the kids being gone is that I don't worry about them coming home at night anymore. So there's none of that me with like sleeping with one eye open, waiting for the car to like peel into the driveway at midnight. I'm not doing that anymore. I know they're out doing things, but I don't know what they're doing or when they're doing it. And so I'm not thinking about it all the time. And that's actually
I agree.
a relief.
Yeah,
that's
freeing.
Yeah, really, really freeing. But when they are sick like that, it's not fun. And I had my phone on that whole night thinking, what if she needs to go to the hospital in the middle of the night by herself? So that's not been super fun for sure. Having this sick kids or kids who are struggling, like Eve did in that year. That's just
so bad.
Tough thing.
Yeah.
And the other thing,
and I have to say, back to Eve and George and all of that, all of my kids have the first term, all of my kids went away, and the first term for all of them was a struggle, and it has gone up from there. So I'm imagining the same trajectory for Duncan and Kate and Georgia. Yeah. But well, not Duncan. Duncan's doing his own thing. Duncan's fine. But our son is doing just great. But I feel like it can only get better from here. This is probably the worst it will be.
Yeah, it's the hardest. Yeah, I think so too. It's often the hardest term for kids. And I think it's really common. It's a super common time for kids to get mono because they're stressed and worn down, and there's, they're not taking care of themselves in the way that maybe they had been taken care of. So I think that's really normal. Let's go back to the Duncan thing though, because that's actually kind of funny. And that was one of the things on my list. The kid who I expected to struggle and be home all the time, because he's a complete homebody, and not complete, but like really loves the creature comforts of home, and also his buddies from the city who stayed here, is the one who I never hear from. Like actually this morning was 50 meters from his residence because I drove up to get Kate, and texted him last night to tell him I was coming, texted him this morning to say I'd love to get a hug or just say hi. And then I'm here when I got there, nothing. And then I phoned him, didn't answer his phone. God love him, but he's really just not interested in being home right now.
God love him.
God love him. He's living his best life at Acadia.
And that's what we want.
It is what we want. And I'm so happy about it. And as Megan knows, he actually did last weekend. He got the vibe from me that I was missing him quite a bit. And ended up last weekend, Kate was home. That's so funny that I say that. Kate was here. And Duncan just showed up to surprise me for dinner, and then left and drove back to Acadia after that. And he said he came because he could tell that I was missing
his mom. Missing his boy.
Yeah, which is very, very sweet. But anyway, he was the one I was worried about. And Georgia was the one that I wasn't really worried about, because she's always been like fiercely independent and very confident. And I don't know, I just really didn't give it a second thought that she was going away to university. I thought, oh, she'll just be fine. And you know what? She is fine. She's fine. And she's made lots of friends, and she's happy, and she's excited for next year. But she has it's been a real struggle. There's been lots of stuff that we didn't anticipate there. So I think there's that. And also, I just want to say, anyone who's listening, I mean, this isn't all about kids going off to university. It doesn't matter where your kid's going, what they're doing after, whenever they leave the home, whether it's to go work somewhere or travel for a while, or, get an apartment with their friends. Like, I think the same things apply. Okay. What are some of the other hardest things? Cooking.
Oh my God. So I was telling Jack that I was doing this with you. And he said, are you going to tell people that you ate chocolate covered peanuts for lunch? And I said, well, actually, probably. So
I know.
Yeah. Eating's weird. So I just had a handful of chocolate covered peanuts for lunch and called it a day.
So Megan and I have been sending each other texts and photos of our lame empty nester dinners, because when you're cooking, the transition from cooking for a family to cooking for two people is actually really hard. And I'm just so accustomed to cooking these family size meals. And it's not that my kids always ate with me as they got older, they didn't, but the food always got eaten, even if it got put in the fridge, for the next day.
I stopped cooking during the pandemic. So Jack took up cooking, which I really appreciate, but he has also, he has struggled with how to feed two people.
Yeah.
He really has. It's tricky. He's like, I guess I'm going to make, he makes something on Tuesday, and he's like, by Saturday, we're ordering out because
We will be
know,
ordering out tonight
done.
because we have nothing. Last night I made something very random from random ingredients that was not highly nutritious, but did like fill us up. But we have no groceries, which is a secret upside to being an empty nester. My grocery bills are like at least half, probably 2/3
Same.
less than what they normally are, which is great. Of course, I'm shelling out a lot of money for my kids to be where they are, but it's that's been a bonus. But just the not having to go to the grocery store all the time actually is really nice, because I was doing that a lot with 2 teenage kids.
But it does mean that you eat weird stuff because there's actually nothing in the fridge. Like I think there are 2 apples left in the fridge and some chocolate covered peanuts and some eggs and some leftover mashed potatoes, and that somehow is going to turn into supper.
Yeah, a lot of random meals. Megan had key lime pie one time. I had for dinner. So good. That's another perk of this too, is that you have complete freedom in that.
Yeah, and you know what? That key lime pie was exactly what I wanted, and I didn't care that I wasn't eating meat and the starch. I did not care.
That's right.
In fact, I might have key lime pie tonight. I don't know. Thanks for the reminder. I'd forgotten about that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Good. With the graham cracker crust.
Yeah, random stuff. Like I had crackers with cheese on them and some chocolate covered pretzels one night.
Oh, my lunch yesterday was pickled asparagus and boursin with crackers.
What? Boursin cheese and crackers? Well, that's not bad. You've got at least a vegetable in there. Anyway, the cooking part is hard, and that's been a real transition. I'm Googling now, like meals for 2, and I'm trying to figure out how to take the recipes that I used to make for 4 or 5 people and cut them back to just for 2 people. And, there's a real transition there, but we'll get there. And also I don't care that much anymore. I just don't care as much, which leads me to my next not so great thing, which is it's hard. It's hard in many ways to maintain a routine that actually serves you, like in terms of balance and wellness and just feeling good. Like it's all fine and dandy to have key lime pie for dinner, but like that after a while does not feel great. You just don't feel good with that. And I think also with just having no structure, because there's no requirement to eat at a particular time or on the weekends, get up at a particular time. Like there's so much freedom that you almost have to figure out what the new normal is in terms of
interestingly about that. So, as I said, I stopped cooking during the pandemic. So Jack does a lot of the cooking, but in some ways, because I leave and go to work every day, it's different for you because you work from home, but I have a routine because I get up, I go to work, I come home. And then Jack and I have, because I don't have to worry about anyone else, we go to the gym 2 nights a week. Mm-hmm. And so that's been nice because I'm trying not to get in bed at 8, which is a tendency of mine. So I'm trying to fill my space a bit differently. Mm-hmm. So in some ways it has forced me to create a bit more of a routine than I had before, which is kind of opposite to what I had thought I might do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I would say we're figuring that part out. So I find the nights long. I work out in the mornings. Rob usually works out before he comes home. But for me, the nights can be really long. But one of the things that I've done is I've just started, my friend Sarah, who is a regular on this podcast, we walk all the time, and I'll go no matter what. It's kind of non-negotiable for me. If she's going and I can go, I'll go. Because just getting outside and talking to somebody and doing something different at night keeps me from having my pajamas on at 6:30 and then, basically whiling away the hours until bedtime. So I think, and that kind of leads to like, one of the things I wanted to talk about, which I have touched on a little bit in this podcast, is that the idea that it's really a great idea if you're listening to this and your kids are in grade 11 or 12 or high school, or they, maybe one of them is gone, but you're waiting for the other ones to leave the nest. I think such a good idea to take a little inventory as to what you have going on that's actually yours. Like, what's going on in your life that's yours? Do you have a career that is fulfilling for you? Do you have some activities and hobbies? Do you have relationships that are fulfilling for you? Have you gotten to a place where your primary relationships are between you and your family members who are about to leave, or between, is work, has work been not so fulfilling, but it wasn't such a big deal because you've been, happily being fulfilled in your parenting, for example. I think it's good to do a little check-in before they leave, because one of the reasons why I think it's been such a, frankly, overall pleasant experience, the empty nesting for me, is that I did that in the last few years, as Megan is well aware. I mean, I realized, I'm not really happy with where my coaching practice is. I don't really love the type of work I'm doing. I really want to do more of this. And then I went and got another certification. And then I did a whole bunch of other things and have changed in a big way, changed my practice, but then also recognizing that I didn't have any creative outlet and all the work I did trying to figure out what that was, and then getting into the writing. I mean, all of that's really saved me. Like, what are some of the things that, does that ring true to you? Because you've got lots of stuff going on in your life. I mean, one of the things that's so amazing about Megan, you guys, is that she is friends with everyone. And so, and she has the most engaging personality in real life. Not that you don't on the podcast, not that you don't on the podcast, but it's hard to get that across in a podcast. Everyone loves her. And so she's got like a gajillion girlfriends, which is awesome. And it feels like you always have something to do, someone to see.
Yeah. And I, like you, I have a girlfriend who I love, who I dog walk with as much as we can. If we're both free, we are walking our dogs. I love my job, and I have loved my job since the day I started the work I do. So that was, you and I were different that way. Like, I have always loved what I do, but I took a bit of inventory, and as you know, I've started taking some classes. I'm doing a certificate in editing. I took an Indigenous Studies class because I figure I might as well do something with my time and learning. I love learning, and my editing class is actually really challenging. It's more difficult than I thought it would be, but I love it because it challenges my brain in a way that's different from my career.
Yeah. No,
I love that.
Yeah. So I think we both kind of did that without even realizing that's what we were doing. But I think it in hindsight, it's really served both of us well. And the other thing I've picked up is, as Megan knows, is I'm starting to learn French again on Duolingo, which is also challenging for my brain. So I do know how to speak French, but I'm not fluent anymore like I once was. And so I'm like I just get on there and do French for half an hour if I'm bored. And that's been really cool too. So if you're not there yet, or even if you're there and you're feeling unfulfilled and a little purposeless, which is so common when kids leave, especially for women, start exploring some of these things that we talk about all the time on this podcast. And if you don't know where to start, go back to when you were a kid. What were the things you did that brought you some joy? What did you enjoy doing when you were young? And then start experimenting with that, or ask your girlfriends what they're doing and go and take some stuff and, just try something once and see if you like it. But that I don't have a ton of time for grief, I think, because I have so much stuff going on in my life that brings me joy.
And actually, we're not grieving.
No,
this isn't a grief process, actually, for me.
No,
it's not a grief process.
I thought it was. I thought it was going to be. And I would definitely would say that the emotion I was feeling in the spring was grief. But it was grief. It wasn't grief like these people are going to be gone and have disappeared from my life. Although I did think they'd be more gone than they have turned out to be. But
fair enough.
I think it was more of I'm grieving this part of my life where I am, where mothering is something I do day in and day out. I'm grieving that. And also I was grieving, obviously, some transition in terms of selling that house and moving. And now all of that has turned out to be just awesome and amazing. But yeah, I think I don't know if grief is the right word. It probably is, but I don't think it's not grief, like grief, the loss of a person or people.
Right. It's not profound the way some grief feels. It's certainly not, like a severing. It's not a severing.
Yours might feel a little different than mine in that regard too, because you had
because I've been emptying. Yeah. I've been emptying. I didn't empty. Yeah.
It did feel a little bit like I just dumped them both out of the nest.
Sure. Yeah. And I did not have that experience because it has been gradual. Yeah. And really and truly, like, I really do think that our kids are away because they're ready to be away. Yeah. And so if I'm ever feeling like, oh my gosh, my house is really empty, I have to remind myself that they are doing exactly what they should be doing.
Yeah, exactly.
And that gives me, if you're like, that gives me comfort to know that about our kids, that they're doing what they should be doing. And that's okay. It's okay that, like, it's great that they're gone.
Yeah, no, totally. And Megan's been like, this is something that, I don't know if I've said this before, but Megan has been one of my well, for sure, my primary role model when it comes to parenting my kids. So I've been watching Megan really carefully over the years, and this is not to say she's done everything perfectly, because nobody does, but she's done it really, really well. And I've learned a ton of things from her. And one of the things I've learned is that exact thing. It's that our kids, first of all, when we went on vacation last year for the first time together as families, which was really, first like fancy vacation together. We met in Mexico.
Fancy. It was fun.
Yeah, it was fancy. And it was really, really fun to have all the teenagers together. We just had a great time. But Megan said to me, I don't know if you remember this, but at some point you said, one of the things you realized is that we never actually had any control over who they were going to be. They were always going to be who they were going to be. And letting go of that idea of control has been really, really helpful to me with my kids. Mm-hmm. I don't actually have any control over who they are. They are who they are. I can teach them things, and, I can have some influence over how they choose, I guess, to show up, but they are very much still the kids that they were. When I look back at their little personalities, like you can see Duncan's just, how would you describe Duncan as a little boy?
Joyful.
Yeah. He was so joyful.
Inquisitive.
Yeah, very much. Curious, joyful, easygoing.
Smiley
kid.
Yeah.
He was not the tantrum kid like we had in our little fold. We're not going to name names here, but we had a couple tantrums.
We didn't have one. We had at least one.
And he was not it. But I still see that in him now. Don't you see that in him as he's a young adult, the joyfulness.
He always has been.
Yeah. And it's the same with Georgia. She's always been determined and independent. Watchful. She's very much the person who's taking it all in. She has a very smart sense of humor, and she always has since she was a little kid.
And I'm thinking about Ella, sorry to interrupt, but Ella is on, so me and Wendy and Rob and Jack are on a group chat, and Ella is in there. So we call it the parent group chat because Ella has always been a parent.
She has, because she's the oldest of the 5, and she's taken care of them always. And that's her innate kind of character. She has lots of other great traits, but one of the things that she does is caretake.
And I think she's very proud of her status as in the parent group chat.
Yeah. And I feel like Eve, you can describe Eve. I'd describe her the way, one of the things I love about Eve is that she's just so not particularly concerned with what anyone thinks. Like, she just does her own thing and marches to her
always
own.
Has.
And she always has. And she doesn't take any nonsense. Never has.
But also deeply caring, right? But also deeply caring.
Deeply caring.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those things are still there. So that conversation that we had really affected me because it almost like I just let myself off the hook, because I think I was feeling a lot of pressure to make sure they were sort of like fully formed before they left. And they have always been fully formed. They've always
been. You know what? Actually, when I think about that trip to Mexico, you were thinking about them leaving then.
Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about this
kind of. So Wendy and I would get up and walk on the beach a lot, and that was a lot of our conversations were about them leaving. So I would say, maybe that was a bit grief filled. It was it was almost like the anticipation of the grief, anticipating them leaving was harder than them leaving.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm writing a chapter called Anticipatory Grief, and it's all about like how much of motherhood is exactly that, because you can't have a first without a last. And, there's just, it's constant little teeny tiny grief. And for me, I've been anticipating grief. And then I've also had a lot of grief around being a mother as well, like grief with loss. And, so anyway, it's an interesting observation. Okay. There were 2 more things we really wanted to talk about. One was the whole marriage sitch and trying to find your new place of balance as a couple when you don't have kids in the home anymore.
So my thing, who's going to go first? So interestingly, I don't know if it's interesting or not, but Jack and I are great. We have tons to talk about. We're easier around each other, which is kind of weird. I don't know if it's weird, but we're easier around each other because we're not talking about parenting, first of all. We're just talking about us. We're talking about what we want to do. We're like, I am not putting his laundry away. I ain't putting his dishes in the dishwasher. So those things, and I don't know why I feel so pissy about that, but I'm like,
but I'm the same. We've talked about this. Like, this is such a
Yeah.
weird thing that happened for both of us, because I was actually not, like, my husband is really pretty much he's a 50% person when it comes to chores around the house. He's pretty good at doing stuff, but I'm annoyed with it. The one thing that I was doing a lot more of was cooking of the food, actually. And I have just said to him like a month ago, I'm not doing this anymore. We're both adults. We both need to eat. We're going to split this 50-50. I'm working long hours. You're working long hours. You're going to have to start planning some meals and then getting the stuff and making them happen. And he has, to his credit, he has been stepping up. We've been eating weird stuff.
yeah, that's all right.
Husband likes to eat weird things, but he has been doing that. But I would not have said that ever. I was happy to do the cooking basically for however many years, 18 years. And this year is like, nope, 50-50, dude.
And for me, it's because he's been cooking for a while and he's a very good cook and he loves to cook.
Yeah.
But man, he can make a fucking mess. And so all of a sudden I'm like, are you actually serious? Like, do you actually have to use 57 bowls to make supper? Because I don't think you do. So I feel annoyed by that. And then I feel annoyed by, like, if you make a sandwich, put everything away. Just put it away, because I'm not going to put it away because I didn't make a sandwich. That's not my job. I'm not putting your laundry away.
I don't know.
I was at Megan's house and I'll fold it. But
I was at Megan's house for about a week, and I knew she was annoyed with Jack about this. And Jack was there working, and he would leave his plates above the dishwasher, and I would put them away.
That's very kind, because I sure as hell wasn't. I'll tell you that right now.
But I wasn't doing
kind of you.
I was not doing that for Jack. I was doing it for you because I knew it was stressing you out. I'd be like, oh, I'm just going to pop this plate.
Well,
but
you know what? But I've also gone beyond the stress.
I don't care. Just don't care. I know. It's not even worth.
Sit there for 2 weeks. I don't even care anymore, which is new because I used to like visually. I like to clean count. Yeah. There's so much stuff I don't care about anymore. It's so weird.
Well, yeah, I think that's part of the transition from, just the empty nester thing, but also the hormonal transition that we're both going through in our age and everything. Like Sarah and I talk about that a lot, just the decrease in estrogen and just how much less we care. And
the decrease in caring.
The decrease in caring. I think there's a correlation, like a direct correlation in how much you care and how much estrogen you have.
I do a lot of not caring. I don't care. You want that plate to sit there for 2 weeks? I don't care.
Yeah. But there is a new, Rob and I.
But you know what? I bitchily wash my own dishes right away as a bitchy move.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I thought you said,
like you
actually said bitchily. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Like, make sure that I'm not leaving my shit around.
Yeah.
Which is actually such a, like, kind of bitchy and calculated. Like when I check my own self, I'm like, but I actually do kind of care because I'm washing all my own shit so that no one can say, well, you left your stuff out.
Yeah, fair enough. And by no one, you mean the only other person in your
yeah, by no one, I mean Jack. God love him. God love him.
Yeah, I think
and I love him. And we're so easy. Like we're so much easier.
Yeah.
Which is weird because Jack and I have been together for 30 years. And, things have been easy and they've been hard and they've been easy and they've been hard. And they're easy and they're easier than I thought they would be. Yeah. I thought it would be weird to fill the space. I thought it would be weird to fill the empty nest with just our two voices.
Yeah.
And it's not weird. And there's more silence, obviously, but it's not weird silence. It's not like heavy weighted, what are we going to talk about silence? It's comfortable. And when we talk about stuff, it's real. So I don't think I anticipated that. I think I talk not anticipatory grief, but I was really expecting that the conversations that we would have would feel forced, and they're so easy.
Yeah. Well, I think that is probably, it's great that that's been your experience, and my experience is similar. It's been great. I suspect that's not always the case. I think it's a time of transition where you really, I feel like it's, what do they say? You separate the wheat from the chaff. It's like, have we got what it takes to be partners and enjoy spending time together, but also enjoy not spending time together? And that goes back, like, I think it's directly connected to the whole having your own life's purpose, having activities and hobbies that you really enjoy.
I was just going to say that you and I both have always been able to spend time away from our spouses and they spend time away from us, and it doesn't, not that we don't care, but it doesn't matter. Like we have other stuff in our lives that,
So
I agree.
I just want to make space for the relationships that for the couples for whom this is probably quite challenging. Like I can see how it would be very challenging if there wasn't a lot outside of parenting that you shared in common anymore. Like I can see that this would be really challenging. I feel very grateful for the fact that that's not me, and I'm grateful that it's not you as well. But it is definitely a transition. It is definitely weird. It is definitely something that I do think you can do some prep work for it. Again, if you're in the early, pre-empty nesting stages, I think you can make sure you're spending time with your spouse. And I mean,
but I haven't felt, for example, like I need to go take golf lessons to go spend time with Jack.
Oh God,
right? Like it's like, that's not happening.
No, neither one of us is ever going to be golfers, but
no. They can golf and Wendy and I can hang out, like get golfing because we're going to do something else.
Yeah. But we have some plans together too, which is cool. Like we've made some plans and we've been talking about them since before the kids left. Like we're going to go do the Camino. That's one of our goals, is to hike part of the Camino for a week or 10 days or something, which is insane.
Can't wait. Yeah. Can't
wait for that. Can't wait. We're planning hopefully a trip as two couples together trip next year. And I went out to see Megan. She was the first person I went to see after the kids left for university. I went out and spent a week with her before Thanksgiving. And next summer you're going to spend some time in Halifax, which is where I am. So that'll be fun. But I do think anticipating the fact that there will be a change in the dynamic in your relationship when the kids are not there is probably a smart thing. And if there are things you can do proactively to reconnect or to create some shared hobbies or, whatever it might be, that's probably a smart move, because it's been different. My phone, before we got on this call, Megan, reminded me, like it now gives me a reminder. You're going to laugh at this. It says something like, play piano chill playlist at this time of day, because it pays attention to what you do. Basically, it's saying like at this time of day, you often play the piano chill playlist.
So Wendy really loves the piano chill. She loves the
spa music,
spa music, anything chill vibes, no actual singing. She likes it.
I like acoustic. I like an acoustic.
Clearly, I like the CBC. I don't know if I actually really like the CBC or if I'm just too lazy to
find
put on a playlist. Yeah. It's very lazy. That's actually
anyway. That's basically, that encapsulates empty nesting for me. The fact that my phone reminds me at 4:30 p.m. on a Friday, people. So it's not like this is Monday at like 2. At 4:30 p.m. on a Friday.
Get your piano chill out, Wendy.
Get your piano chill going, because that's what you need right now. So I think that's probably it. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about today, Meg?
No, I think everyone's experience will be different. I think anticipating how your marriage will change is probably a good thing to anticipate, but not to perseverate about, because.
But there are also going to be lots of people listening to this podcast who are not married, or who are, there are going to be single parents listening to this podcast, or people who are.
I think that
that's a whole different, we can't really speak to that. I think that would be that'd be a different situation. Some of this stuff would be the same, but some of it would be different.
I think finding, I really enjoyed my Indigenous Studies class, and I'm loving my editing certificate because I'm doing that for me on my own time. And it also fills my nights, which is, as you said, the nights are weird. So finding what you love and doing it, I think is important. Probably having a bit of routine, knowing that ultimately our kids are going to be okay, is a comfort. Yeah. But I think that's it. I don't know.
When they do come home, it's really awesome. I will say that, like when they're home,
I can't wait.
It's so nice. It's that absence makes the heart grow fonder thing, where you're just like ready to kill them. I was ready. I'm not going to lie. Like there were times when they were teenagers where I was at the end of my rope as you were sometimes with some of yours. Like that's just how it is to parent teenagers. But I am so happy when they come home, and I feel like I value that time with them in a way that I wouldn't have when I took it for granted, because they were always around. Like it's a different, of course that's happening, but I'm excited to have them home for Christmas. And I know you're excited to have your people home for Christmas. And in the meantime, I'll just parent your child here.
And I have to say, shout out to you. I am thrilled that Kate has you. And I'm thrilled to know that when she needs a break, she has a place to take a break. So this has nothing to do with empty nesting, and this is just a shout out to my pal. Thanks, girl. It makes a huge difference. It makes all the difference in the world, actually.
Yeah.
And it provides me with a comfort that I didn't know I needed.
Yeah. Well, it's really nice for me. I love it. I love having an extra, especially like a daughter here, because mine is in the middle of the country. So that's nice. But one of the things that you've done for me over the years is quietly parent from afar with my kids. And there have been many times where you've like sent a text to one of my kids when they're not speaking to me, or, they need a little extra support or love. And it's been so awesome to have.
And it's nice that we know each other's kids more than we did.
Yeah.
We knew them when they were little, and we're knowing them again now as they're big. But that middle part was kind of like a no man's land.
Right.
And so that's really great.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's been amazing. Overall, the message is empty nesting is not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. I'm actually kind of grooving on it. I've got lots of great things going on, but I also put the work in to make sure that I did. And I think that's really the lesson that I'm really glad I didn't have to learn. Like that I actually did that in advance. Yeah, it's been pretty great. So, and there's nobody I would want to be doing this with more than Megan. And it's so awesome that we get to do this together. So that's it. So I'm going to go put my piano chill on now. What are you going to
get your piano chill on and feed my kid when she wakes up?
I'm going to feed her. Don't worry. Okay. Thanks, Meg. Love you.
Okay. Big kiss. Love you.
Bye.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a burnout and balance coach, I help busy high achievers like you create a more balanced, joyful life. Ready to create a life you don't want to escape from? Download your free Blueprint for Change now. This incredible workbook includes some of my favorite coaching tools and will help you get clear on what you need more and less of in your life. Grab it at www.wendymccallum.com/blueprint. That's www.wendymccallum.com/blueprint.